Ecclesiastes 9, verses 11 and 12 will be the first one. And then we'll go over to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. So Ecclesiastes 9, 11 and 12. I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned. But time and chance happen to all. Moreover, no one knows when their hour will come. As fish are caught in a cruel net, or birds are taken in a snare, so people are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. And now Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God.
Well, we're getting off to a good start, aren't we?
Amen.
This is water. Could be a lot worse. All right. Well, got a lot of visitors here. Glad to see everybody, and we're going to continue on our series today. We're looking at what sports can teach us as Christians, and doing this. Building the idea of teams and teamwork because we got the evangelistic campaign coming up in September, and just want to encourage everybody to be involved with it. And today I want to try and use the idea, we'll see how this works, of auto racing, because obviously in the scriptures when he talked about races and runnings, he meant running like I did in track, but we're in race country, auto racing country kind of, with Indianapolis not too far away. And I know that is big, a big event. I think the Speedway over there holds about 100,000 people. And then down south, of course, NASCAR is a big deal, the Daytona 500. And then I found this. I don't know if anybody's heard of this. Hemming Motor News, a great race. Now, this is not a speed race, but it goes St. Augustine, Florida, to Colorado Springs. It's more of a, what we used to do in ROTC is orienteering. You're map reading and staying on a course for time. And that's how they judge it. They don't want you doing like the Gumball Rally, if you remember that movie, speeding across country. It's more about how do you get from point A to point B, and can you do it and follow directions. And everybody wants to win when you get into a race, when you get into any kind of an athletic competition. That's the idea, is to win. This is this year, or this year's Indy 500 winner, and last year's Daytona 500 winner. When you for the athletes in the audience, how many of you trained and practiced and just thought, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to lose? We all went into it with the mentality to win, didn't we? We wanted to get that prize. And as we are in the race of life, not only should we want to win, but we should be wanting to take as many people with us. Because as we look at this track, as you can see, it's kind of oval. We don't go straight from point A to point B in most races, but we do have an oval, a shape that we go in, or a circle, or whatever. And I want to use that and see if we can move that over and make some application for it. And I call this Start Your Engines, because as Christians, we need to start our engines and be very enthusiastic about our Christianity. We talked about sharing our story today in the Bible class, or some would call it their testimony. But the idea is to tell people about Jesus, and the one thing I have noticed that helps get attention, when I was worked for a State Farm agent, was showing some excitement about it. And if you've ever been in sales, or you had to talk to a salesman, you like the salesman to believe in the product, don't you? Like a friend of mine who worked for a Chevy dealer, and a coworker drove a Toyota. Or if you own the restaurant but you won't eat the food there. That doesn't show a lot of faith or a lot of excitement in the product, does it? But let's show people that yes, Jesus is real. He came to save us from our sin, and we want you, this is so important, we want you to hear it. So I made this up, this little logo here for our Campaign for Christ 2024, and taking Jesus to Danville. And that's kind of black and white up there, I know, but that's an aerial shot of Danville. I just superimposed Jesus or an artist's depiction of Jesus over it. So we can take this message out there. There's, I think, roughly 30,000 people in Danville that need Jesus. But let's look at the idea of an auto race and consider the pit crew for just a minute. Because the pit crew for the Christian is going to be here at the local church. You know, a driver pulls in to get his car serviced real fast at the race, and notice over here how they're all converging on it. When we come in here, we should be converging on each other in the sense that we're building one another up. We're building up the local church like a pit crew builds up and gets a car ready to go back out. I had an overnight flight one time, and I sat next to a man who was on his way to Vegas to interview for a pit crew. I don't know how he managed to do it. He was up all night flying and was going to be in a race that weekend and was going to show what he could do as part of a pit crew, because you got to be fast. And as Christians, we've got to not only be fast in the sense of sharing the gospel and seeing the urgency, but we've also got to know what we believe, why we believe it, as we talked about this morning. This is the place where people come to change the worn-out tires of life and to get recharged. At least it should be. Now, in our travels, we visited a lot of churches, and there are some that, quite frankly, aren't that recharging. They're more of a drain, but that's the goal. This to be recharging. Recharge and refuel. This should be a place to refresh, so that as we come in, we get ourselves charged, which I hope the classes and the lessons do. I know the teachers put a lot of effort into making them that way, so they will be something that will be a profitable time. And then we get our windshield clean, so to speak, so we can have a proper worldview of what the Bible says. And then we go back out and pull back into the lane on the track, and we're off to take and to live our Christianity outside the building. Because that is one of the things we do tell people at the door when we're here from the East Park Church of Christ, and we want to get our Christianity out of the building. Our Christianity doesn't do us much good if we leave it here in the building, does it? We got to take it with us. And the church is a support for us all in tough times. I talked a little about this this morning. You know, there are all times when we are having problems in life. We get worn out. I can tell you the burnout rate among preachers and elders is pretty high, because there's a lot of responsibility that goes into it. We even go through tough times. And so that's when we come in here and we need recharge too, because if we don't get recharged and if we don't get through the tough time, we can hit the wall just like these drivers do. And that creates a racetrack, a big issue for safety and other things. What do you think it does when we spiritually hit the wall? It's a lot more riding on it than an auto race. We are told in Galatians to carry each other's burdens. And in this way you fulfill the law of Christ. How do we carry each other's burdens? A little sidetrack here. In the old King James, it says to bear ye one another's burdens, so fulfill the law of Christ. Then look at verse 5. Every man shall bear his own burden. What do we do with that? Now this might make it a little clearer. Bear one another's burdens, so fulfill the law of Christ, for each shall bear his own load. Really, the first word is assisting, helping somebody. There are two different words in the original language. So if you're picking up this table here, it's on wheels, but just pretend for a minute it's not. And you're trying to carry it out the door, and I come along and say, here, let me help you. And I grab it in, you grab it in, and we take it out. That's what the first one is saying. But the second one is talking about responsibility. You have the responsibility to pay your mortgage, pay your rent, pay your groceries, all that. That's your responsibility. But I can help bear that burden if you're short this month, you need an extra $100 or whatever. I can help you with that burden, but you have the ultimate responsibility. All right, make sense? Yes? No? Anybody out there? Yes? Amen. All right. This is how we can help one another. The pit crew, when we come in, by bearing one another's burdens, showing the concern, praying for one another. When you look around and you see someone who's not here, we can always call them, send them a card, and make sure we are praying for them. Because you never know why. There may be an illness or something going on. But we need to help lift those folks up and one another here. When we are here, sometimes we're still here. We're still struggling. But those who are spiritual are given the task to reach out to those in need. And by spiritual, look at Galatians 5. Putting those fruits of the Spirit into action and using them. And we're all going to be at different levels, and sometimes different levels at different times. Some of us have been Christians for years, decades, but we'll still have struggles. There'll still be areas of life that we need the encouragement from the rest of our crew to be that family. Satan, remember, is smart. He's not all-knowing, but he is a very keen observer of human contact. He'll know where to get us. That's why we need to stand together, stick together, and submit to God and flee the devil. Resist the devil. Which then means, too, that we've got to stay focused. What's our ultimate goal? As Christians, what's our ultimate goal? To just come here on Sundays and Wednesdays? I think how many of us would say heaven's the ultimate goal? Eternity with the Lord. Okay. How many of us have family and friends that we want to go be there with us? That's where we've got to keep our focus. The race is not over until we cross that finish line. 1 Corinthians 9 tells us. And we are to be a people of hope. That's a message we have for our community. With the hope that they have not only when they stand before the Lord, but there's still hope here. We've got to let people know there is something better here than what they have here in this life. And push them and encourage them to go to the finish line. Because what happens when a car veers off the track? Well, they lose time. That's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, they wipe out. They hit the wall, they hit another car. What happens when a Christian loses our focus? We can also spiritually hit the wall. If we're not focused on the Lord, if we're focused on our circumstances. For instance, remember when the disciples got in the boat and crossed over and they hit the storm. Where was Jesus? Sacked out, asleep. Lord, wake up! Don't you care? We're about to sink. And he got up and rebuked the wind. Oh, and remember too, when they got on that boat, they were doing exactly what Jesus told them to do. And what they do? Right, smack into a storm. So does that mean as a Christian we're always going to have smooth sailing? Literally, no, in that case. But no, we'll still have it. Even obeying God is going to create issues and problems and challenges. But it's not us that's causing the problem. It's when people reject the gospel. That's where the problem comes in. This is the way the Bible phrases it, saying about the two different lanes. One is straight and narrow. One is wide and broad, leads to destruction. Our focus needs to be on the narrow and moving ahead as the Lord wants us to. That narrow gate is a confined space, just like the lanes on a racetrack. I ran a track, I did the 400 meter, not very well, but I did it, and I had to stay in the lane. Race car drivers, I think, can get out and go around and pass other cars, but the idea there is you still have a limited space. And what we have to be careful with our directions, making sure we're on one way and going the right way, the right direction, just like on a track. Because it is so vital for Christians to walk with the Lord every day. Because if we're not walking with the Lord when we leave here, we can't be the Saturday night sinners and the Sunday saints. I remember in college, a lot of folks trying to do that. Some of them finally got serious, some of them didn't. And some of the ones I know who didn't are in pretty rough shape right now spiritually because they decided not to stay on the track and continue heading for the ultimate goal. Which means also we have to keep our eyes on the goal. We have to be focused. We have to keep our eyes on the goal. Now, I've never driven on a racetrack, but how many of us have been in heavy traffic, big cities, Chicago, Indianapolis, Los Angeles, and you've got to be really multitask and concentrate on the things around you? How many of you have had passengers in the car where you've told them, okay, everybody quiet, turn the radio off so I can focus? We got to have that kind of focus on our work for the Lord. Not letting anything distract us. And a good race driver will keep his eye on that goal, keep himself focused, just like a runner, and head for the prize, head for the finish line. And I want to take as many people as I can with me across that line. That's the gospel. That's the importance of it. Going back to the winners, they train to win. They train to get over that line. Are we training to win? Are we training to take as many over with us? To be in that ultimate, heavenly, eternal winner circle? Because we can't look over our shoulders. Another thing we have to keep in mind what Paul was telling us in Philippians chapter 3. That he forgot what was behind and looked ahead. What happens if you look over your shoulder? Anybody ever tried to drive down the road looking over your shoulder? Doesn't work very well, does it? I did it once on a riding mower. I forgot why, but I got distracted by something. And you could see with the part where I was distracted. Instead of going straight, it was like that. Or if you've ever run, any runners in here, if you run and look over your shoulder, it doesn't take much to turn your head. It's going to slow you down. Just automatically, naturally slow you down. But as a Christian, that's the application here is looking ahead, not looking at our past. We all have a past. We've all done things that we weren't too proud of, things that sometimes we still beat ourselves up over. But remember how Paul put it. Forget the things that are behind. Moving or pressing forward toward the mark of the prize of the calling of God in Christ Jesus. He said, brother, I don't count myself to have apprehended. But this one thing I do, forgetting those things that are behind and reaching forward, I press toward the goal of the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Forgetting, sometimes it's hard to do. Some of the things we've done maybe in the past. But Paul had a lot to forget. He was standing there while Stephen was stoned. He was arresting Christians for their faith. He had a lot to forget. And I sometimes wonder if some of that didn't keep him awake at night. But he put it behind him and pressed on. And as Christians, we've got to press on. Let people know Jesus, God through Jesus forgives. We can put our past behind us and don't dwell on it. Grow in the knowledge of God by concentrating and focusing on the goal and keeping our focus laser sharp, and realize that we are forgiven and we can move on serving the Lord and continue telling people, continue ourselves growing in our faith, stay on the track, stay on the course, because we are in a spiritual battle, which I think too many Christians today have lost sight of. We are more out for a Sunday drive in the country, or we are out for a picnic. We don't realize just how serious of a situation we're in spiritually. They realized it, I think, back then. Remember, Paul said, our struggle, that should give us a clue, is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against authorities, against the powers of this dark world. And then right after that, what does he talk about? The armor of God. What's armor for? We're going out on the town on a Saturday night. I don't see anybody wearing armor for their Sunday going to meeting clothes. What's it for? Battle. War. It's something we all have to prepare for. And he uses the illustration of that. Wrestling. Races. And in a race, it's only a matter if you cross the finish line first to win. Now that's a race, in the secular sense. But as a Christian, there's going to be room for many more to cross the finish line. In the Christian life, there'll be times we will stumble too sometimes when we're trying to finish the race. And that's where we can lift one another up. Hebrews chapter 12. We got that up here. Where is it? I didn't put it there. But Hebrews Hebrews chapter 12 that we had read just a moment ago, he tells us to shed the weight that is hindering us. I know some runners that sometimes would wear weights as they train and then dump them for a race to lighten the load. Whatever is holding you back, let it go. Whatever may be, so that you can move ahead on the race. And then our race is endurance is more important than speed. Many times in a race, like when I ran, and yeah, speed was important. But if my brother was a marathon runner, endurance is more important in those cases, to finish the race. And in our race of life, endurance is what's going to be important. That's what Solomon tells us in Ecclesiastes 9. After you live your life for a while, you start to understand what he's talking about. He states a truth that many of us have had to learn sometimes the hard way, that we are not guaranteed to finish first. We're not guaranteed always success. Notice what he says, that it's true that some of these who do fail in their endeavors due to things outside of their control. In chapter 9, there, verse 11 and 12. Remember, he's at the end of his life as he's writing this. He's looking back, and he warns us that there are going to be times things happen. And he uses the illustration of a fish that gets caught in nets, birds that get caught in snares. And says sometimes those things happen. And sometimes they'll try and hold us back. But this is where the endurance comes in. Hebrews 12, verse 1. And letting go of those things that hold us back. Letting go of those things that might cause us to stumble or hit the wall or stumble out of our way. And putting that behind us as we push ahead. As we push ahead for the Lord. Notice Hebrews 12:1, if you want to turn back over there. If you stop and think about it, endurance is what is this race that we call life is. Now in the movies, if a director doesn't, like somebody blows their lines, what does the director do? Cut. Let's redo that. I mean, here's how I want your lines to do. We got a problem with this problem, let's fix it. But life isn't that way, is it? It's more like an improv. It's more like one of those plays, or they call them reality shows. They're not really real, but where you got a kind of a basic outline, and then you ad-lib and make it up as you go. That's more what life is, isn't it? We don't get do-overs. Our race requires endurance and concentration, fixing our eyes on Jesus, giving the Lord our undivided attention as we're pushing ahead for the finish line. And then fixing our eyes on Jesus, known as the author and finisher or perfecter of our faith, refers to one who goes first. Jesus went first. He's the leader. He went and tasted death for all of us. God made him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf so that we might become his righteousness. That's the one who's causing something to begin. He's the originator. He's the founder. He said he would establish his church. One of them, not hundreds of different denominations, not a popular thing to talk about, but that's what he said he was going to do, was to create one. No matter how we live our life, fast lane or slow lane, one day we will reach the finish line. So when you cross that finish line, are you going to be over here in the winner's circle, or are you going to be over here on the outs? Are you going to be a sheep or a goat? Well done, good and faithful servant. And when we cross that finish line into eternity, we do face the judgment of God. And are you caught up in our human race that we don't have time for the things of God? That he'll say, I never knew you. Depart from me. I want everybody to be in that winner's circle. And today, if he was in the parking lot, I would ask this a lot, but if we go out of the parking lot, Jesus is there and says, all right, time's up, I'm taking my people home. You know without a doubt you're going to go with them. Where are you in that race? Are you on that path to heaven or the path to eternal condemnation, to hell? I want everybody to be on the path going the right way. I want us all to be in that winner's circle. So where are you this morning? I can't answer that question. Only you can answer it. To know your situation, to know your relationship with the Lord. And so if the answer to that question that I put to you is no or I don't know, then let's talk about it. Let's make sure that we're all ready, that we're in this race, that we're all headed for the same finish line. And if we can help you, we'll stand. to you privately, whatever works.